Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Georgia was lying in bed and she didn't feel like sleeping at all. She took her phone from the nightstand and flipped through the pictures of them together with Alex. Yes, the people around them were right when they said that they were a beautiful couple. The girls were chasing Alex, and Georgia had a lot of admirers, but she'd never dated anyone but Alex. He paid attention to the girl as soon as she finished ninth grade and Georgia disappeared, drowning in the pool of his black eyes. Alex was 3 years older than the girl, and Georgia's friends were always talking about him, saying that he was going out and that he had a couple of 3 girls besides Georgia. But Georgia didn't believe it. She knew her lover was being slandered out of envy. And there was plenty of envy around. The couple overcame everything and now a year, as they lived together in the apartment, which Alex inherited from his grandmother. Georgia was still in school. The girl was finishing the last course in her 19 years, and Alex was looking for a job, while the guy worked part-time as a cab driver in his Priora, which he had saved up for himself. He was still working, that's why Georgia was lying in bed alone, missing her lover. The girl was against his nighttime work, but Alex assured her that nighttime was always the night with the most money. At night, he often drove drunk people around who were not stingy on tips. And Georgia was also confused by the fact that lately Alex had been having a few drinks with his clients and often got behind the wheel drunk. It's only for a while, the girl frowned, until he gets caught. Although, every time Georgia caught a whiff of alcohol from her boyfriend, he assured her it was an emergency and wouldn't happen again. Let's hope so, smiled Georgia, glancing at one of the photos where Alex was particularly handsome. In it, he looked like an actor playing a superhero that saves the world. With this smile on her lips, she fell asleep, putting the phone on the empty pillow next to her. She was awakened by a rumble in the hallway. Someone had dropped a shoe rack on the floor. Georgia looked at the time on the phone lying next to her. 3 o'clock in the morning. That was odd. Usually Alex didn't come back until the morning when he left for the night shift. And was it even him? Startled, Georgia jumped out of bed and, throwing on a light negligee, gingerly looked out of the bedroom. It was Alex, but she had never seen him like this before. He stood firmly on his feet. But his eyes were as if they were insane. The guy looked at his friend, and as if he couldn't see her, couldn't focus his gaze. "Alex, what's wrong with you?" The girl exclaimed. "Are you drunk again?" "A little bit, just a little bit." "It's not alcohol, it's different." "What's different?" Georgia was horrified. "Alex, what is it, drugs?" "I'm a fool, I know. One of my clients suggested I try a pill, and it just blew my mind. I'll never, ever again. Georgia, I'm a fool," mumbled incoherently as he began to undress in the hallway. Eventually, he threw off all his clothes. "Alex, what are you doing? Let me get your stuff." Don't take anything." The guy sharply dismissed Georgia, who had already bent down to pick up a pile of things thrown on the floor. "It's all in the wash. Right now in the wash. Who does laundry at night? I'll drop it off in the morning. Why do you need it so bad?" "The customer was drunk and threw up on me." "Don't touch it. I'll put it in the car myself." Georgia was surprised by Alex's insistence, but she didn't interfere with the insane guy and stood with her arms folded across her chest, watching him shove all his stuff into the washer compartment and dump nearly half a pack of powder in there. "There's no use talking to him now," thought the girl. "I'll talk in the morning, seriously talk. This is getting out of hand. The pill he's tried." Georgia snorted unhappily and went to sleep. After a while, Alex fell asleep on the bed and instantly passed out. In the morning, when Georgia was going to school, Alex didn't wake up. She took all his clothes out of the washing machine and hung them neatly on the dryer. Before leaving, she peeked into the bedroom. The guy was asleep with his mouth ajar and drool dripping from the corner of his lips. The girl smiled. Despite all the quirks, she loved him so much. Georgia walked into the room and covered Alex with the blanket that had slipped down. "Let him sleep. We can talk later." However, when Georgia returned home from school, she didn't find Alex there, although his car was still parked near the entrance. This circumstance struck the girl. Alex never walked. He even went to the neighboring store for bread only by car. Georgia took a piece of frozen minced meat out of the freezer and put it in the microwave to defrost, deciding to make cutlets. She thought Alex was in the neighborhood and should be here any minute. But time passed, the cutlets were cooling in the pan, and the guy was still gone. When Georgia tried to call him, she found his phone lying in the bedroom next to the bed, as if accidentally dropped. The girl got nervous, and when her phone rang from an unfamiliar number, she grabbed it lightning fast. She was not mistaken, it was Alex, but his voice sounded strangely, unusually agitated. "Georgia, listen carefully. I don't have much time. I've been arrested. I'm innocent of what I'm accused of. I swear to you. You have to save me if you love me. When they ask you what time I came home last night, you must tell them I came home at 11 o'clock at night. You hear me, 11 o'clock. What happened? I don't understand anything," Georgia shouted into the phone. "What can you be accused of? Don't interrupt, listen to me. Just one more thing. Find some clothes I've already worn and hang them on a chair in the bedroom. If anyone asks, tell them I wore them last night." "Tell who? What's going on?" "You'll tell the police when they come to see you." "What the hell did you do? Is that why you washed your clothes last night?" "I explained to you why I was doing laundry. But in light of recent events, it might look suspicious and work against me. Georgia, trust me, please, please save me." The call was cut off abruptly, half-heartedly. Georgia stared unblinkingly at the phone, stunned. But she didn't have time to think. At the same second, the doorbell rang. She jumped up and rushed into the hallway, hoping that everything Alex had said would be a prank and that he would be standing at the door, laughing and, preferably, with a bouquet of flowers. Why didn't he open the door with his own key, though? Georgina's hand froze in midair as she was about to swing the door open, and she used the peephole for the first time in a long time. There were several policemen on the landing, and one of them was ringing the neighbor's doorbell. The girl's heart raced. What had Alex said about what time he got back? What about the clothes? Georgia rushed into the bathroom. There, from the basket with dirty laundry, the girl took out the jeans and sweater already worn by Alex, and running into the bedroom, hung them on the chair next to the bed. The doorbell was already ringing very insistently, and Georgia was taking her boyfriend's clothes from the dryer, which had had time to dry. Only then did Georgia open the door. Uniformed men piled into the apartment, leading two senior citizens from the apartment across the hall. Interrogators, for some reason Georgia immediately realized, though she had never encountered such a thing. A paper was shoved in the girl's face. She didn't have time to read anything on it, and the apartment was searched. Then Georgia was asked what time her roommate came home. 11 o'clock at night, squeaked the girl. "Are you sure?" Raised his eyebrows at the young man in civilian clothes. "I'm absolutely sure. We watched TV and went to bed at 12. Georgia hadn't expected herself to be such a vigorous liar. Alex's voice was always in her head, begging her to save him. When she was asked what clothes Alex had been wearing yesterday, she pointed her finger at the sweater and jeans she had taken out of the dirty laundry basket a few minutes before. The next day, first thing in the morning, Georgia was sitting in the office of the same young man who had interviewed her in the apartment during the search. She realized that he was the investigator in charge of the case. But what kind of case? "Can you finally explain to me what you're accusing Alex of? What happened?" "You don't know yet?" The investigator was surprised. "Wow. Are you living in isolation? The whole town is buzzing about this tragedy, about the 11-year-old girl who was found." "The same girl?" Georgia was horrified. "The one who was murdered last night?" "Yes, she'd been strangled and abused. She was found on the outskirts of town, behind an abandoned stadium." When Georgia realized what the coroner was trying to charge her boyfriend with, she was kind of relieved. If Alex had been accused of killing someone in a drunken brawl, for example, then yeah, she'd think she was covering up for the killer. But here, a girl. Alex couldn't have done that, so George is doing the right thing by saving him. All the investigator has to do now is find someone to pin this case on. Georgia nervously grabbed a piece of paper from the desk and began to write a statement that Alex had come home at 11 o'clock at night and had never left the apartment. The elderly investigator looked with mute reproach at the bowed head of this beautiful girl, carefully choosing and writing words on paper. "Are you sure of what you are doing?" the man asked quietly. "This girl, she's a child. Whoever did this to her is not a human being. It's a beast." "That's right." Georgia was furious. "That's exactly what I understand. Only a monster could do such a thing. What's Alex got to do with it? I'm telling you, he was home at 11 o'clock at night. What makes you think he had anything to do with it? I'll tell you why. This girl's mom is a nurse and she was on the night shift. As usual, she called a cab and put her daughter in the car. She herself personally escorted the cab driver to take the girl to her aunt's house, where Selena always slept over when her mom worked the night shift. It was 10 o'clock at night. The cab driver, as you yourself probably realized by now, was your Alex. He doesn't deny that, except he says he drove the girl to her destination. But she never made it to her aunt's driveway. At about 5 o'clock a.m., her body was discovered by a homeless guide who hangs around the abandoned stadium. He claims to have seen the prior pulling away from the stadium at 3:30 in the morning. Except the homeless man couldn't see the license plate number in the dark. Forensics says the girl was strangled after 2 o'clock a.m. and now, knowing all this, you're still going to say that Alex was home at 11 o'clock at night? Of course I will. Georgia was indignant. Listen to yourself. Alex put the girl in his car at 10 o'clock in the evening, and the crime was committed at 2 o'clock. How can you imagine that? What was he doing with her all that time? You don't want to know what he was doing, the investigator sighed. I wouldn't want to know it myself. I've worked in the police for a long time, but this is the first time in my practice. I'd rather retire than realize that such people walk the earth. Exactly. That's right. Georgia almost cried. They are. And my Alex is not like that. He's just a normal person. He has his faults, of course, but he's not a monster. He would never do something like that. There, I've written it all. I've written the truth. When will you release Alex? Well, the investigator curled his lips, running his eyes over the nervously written lines. We'll let him go soon, we'll have to. You provided an alibi for your Alex, but I advise you to think hard about perjury. There's no perjury. I wrote the truth. Let Alex go. Alex was released after lunch, and all this time Georgia did not leave the police building. She waited on a bench near the duty officer. As she sat there, she noticed a drunken black woman walking by with a loping gait, and having looked closely, I realized that the woman was not drunk at all. She was staggering from something else, and her face seemed black by association, as if blackened by grief. The woman was still young, a little over 30, and her beautiful blonde hair waved out from under a crookedly tied black scarf. Georgia didn't know why the word black came to mind when she saw her. Georgia had a suspicion who this woman, blackened with pain, might be, and she wasn't wrong in her assumption. It so happened that Alex, accompanied by a policeman, came out to Georgia at the same time as that woman, who came back from the depths of the building. When she saw the guy, she howled like a wounded she-wolf and threw herself at him, clawing at his hair. "Ooh," howled the woman, "it's you, it's you." The policeman accompanying Alex was barely able to tear her away from the guy, who looked around in a huff and made no attempt to defend himself. And the woman continued to rage, held by 2 policemen, as the duty officer jumped out of his booth at the noise. Why is he leaving? Why are you letting him go? What are you doing? The uniformed man tried to reason with the grief-stricken woman. It's not him. The cab driver had nothing to do with it. He was already home at 11 o'clock p.m. here. The girl confirms his alibi. It's not his fault. It can't be. I feel it. I know it's him. He did this to my little girl, howled the suffering mother. Alex, who came to his senses, grabbed Georgia's hand and quickly ran out of the police building with her. Once outside, Georgia noisily sucked in fresh air and for some reason asked Alex in a whisper, "Is that girl's mom?" "Yes." "Oh my God, what grief. But why is she thinking about you?" "Come on, let's go quickly. We'll talk at home." Still dragging Georgia by the hand, Alex, moving quickly down the street. They reached the house on foot without a single word until they entered the apartment. And already there, as soon as the door was shut behind them, Alex immediately fell on his knees and wrapped his arms around Georgia's legs, burying his face in them. "Georgia, it wasn't me. I swear to you, it wasn't me. Do you believe me?" "Of course I believe you," Georgia almost cried. "Otherwise, how could I confirm your alibi? Whoever did that to a child is not a human being. I've known you for years, lived with you, slept with you. You couldn't have done this. It was just a coincidence. And then there were your clothes, which you rushed to wash at night." Alex froze, his arms around Georgia tensed. "I told you why I was doing laundry. Do you doubt it?" "I'm telling you again, Alex. If I'd had any doubts at all, I wouldn't have written anything to the police. It's a shame. It's a shame for that girl and her mom. Did you see her suffer? But it's not about you and me, Alex said, rising to his feet. We must forget this event like a terrible dream. I feel sorry for that poor woman too, but to accuse me only on the grounds that I gave her daughter a ride is stupid. Nevertheless, Alex decided not to go out taxiing for the time being, until the fuss died down in town. Georgia, on the other hand, had to go to school, where her classmates began to leer at her. Some wondered if Alex had actually been home that night. It was hard for Georgia to withstand the pressure, but it became even harder when, on her way home after school, she saw a familiar woman in a black scarf near her driveway. The girl wanted to rush past. She couldn't. The woman rushed toward Georgia, not letting her pass. It was a hard conversation, and the heavy gaze of a grief-stricken mother penetrating right into Georgia's soul. What are you doing? Why are you covering up for my daughter's killer? He was only released based on your testimony. Because it wasn't him. It's not him. Georgia was screaming hysterically. I don't know, the woman stared hard at Georgia, whether you're covering for him willfully or not. If not intentionally, then I'm begging you, wake up, open your eyes. The woman didn't want to let go of Georgia, and her words became more and more threatening. The girl could barely break free and ran into her driveway. Mom, we'll probably move out of this town. Alex has already filed an advertisement for the apartment, Georgia said without looking at her mother, and continued to roll out the dough for dumplings. The girl had been visiting her parents since morning, but she couldn't start this conversation. Georgia's mother froze, her hand stirring the mincemeat frozen in the air. I don't get it. What do you mean you're moving? Where do you think you're going? What about your wedding? We've decided we're not getting married. We're going to get married, and that's it. No celebration. Alex got a good job offer, but it's in Washington. We're going there. What the hell is this? What do you mean you're leaving? What's going on? Is this about the whole dead girl thing? But it should be obvious to everyone that Alex couldn't have done it. He was with you at the time, wasn't he? Of course he was, Mom, but you can't prove it to people. Some people keep looking at us. Georgia really downplayed the problem. Squinting wasn't the right word. It was more like stalking. Georgia had graduated with all her friends gone. Her classmates wouldn't talk to her. And Alex's car, parked in the yard, was constantly smeared with shit and bad words written on it. Alex and Georgia understood why this was happening, because the dead girl's mom, Maria, kept telling everyone that Alex was the real killer and Georgia was covering for him. Georgia's mom didn't know all this. The girl didn't want to worry her parents with such stories. Georgia, I still don't understand. What, Washington? It'll all blow over. People will calm down. And the police, after all, have to find the real killer. They don't seem to be in any hurry to find him. Georgia sighed bitterly. And Washington's already taken care of, Mammy. I'm sorry, I'm only telling you now. Alex and I are going there as soon as we're married. We've already set up our first meeting with possible buyers for tomorrow. Don't worry, DC isn't far away. And we'll visit you, and you and Daddy will come visit us. All evening, making dumplings with her daughter, Georgia's mother tried to dissuade her from a rash act, but it was useless. A month later, the young couple got married, and only Georgia's parents and Alex's mom were present at the registry office. Neither friends nor girlfriends were there, and the same day the couple, who became husband and wife, left their hometown. They left to start from scratch, but not with empty pockets. They had money from the sale of an apartment and a car, so there should be no problems with housing. At the same time, in another part of the city, Maria, the dead girl's mother, was being processed for treatment in a psychiatric clinic. She was persuaded to go there by her own sister, fearing that the woman had begun to go mad. She spent all her free time at the cemetery, near her daughter's grave, and worst of all, she stayed there overnight. I can't go home, Selena is scared to stay here alone in the dark, Maria told her sister. And even more frightening was Maria's statement. I will kill Alex myself. People like him shouldn't walk the earth. What are you talking about? The police proved it wasn't the guy's fault. Of course, Selena had his marks on her body, but that can be explained. She was riding in his car before. Most importantly, the DNA didn't match Alex's. The killer's someone else. The investigator says he's looking for the real killer. Maria just chuckled at her sister's words. She knew for a fact that Alex was guilty. The woman remembered the evening when she walked her daughter to the cab. The driver had given the girl a carnivorous, inebriated look. Is he drunk? Thought Maria at the time. No, he can't be. He's driving. He must be imagining it. She dismissed the bad thoughts from her mind. Then she returned to the house and began to get ready for work, but the cab driver's gaze did not give her peace. The woman dialed her sister, to whom her daughter was on her way. Listen, go out to the entrance. Meet the cab car. I'm not feeling so good in my heart. Selena left in a Priora. The sister fulfilled Maria's request. She came down and stood near the entrance for a long time. And as she later claimed, no Priora had driven by. The cab driver claimed that he drove the girl, just for some reason, dropped her off at the corner of the house, as if Selena had asked him to do so. Maria was sure the cabbie was lying. She saw him as a beast in her heart. And when the woman told everyone she was going to kill Alex, she wasn't lying. She was preparing for it. Maybe she would have done it already, except Alex stopped leaving the house. Maria often sat hidden on the playground in the yard of his house. Only his girlfriend came out of the entryway. The woman looked at her and wondered whether she was covering for her boyfriend intentionally, and could not make up her mind. And then Maria went into a psychiatric hospital. This was taken care of by her sister, very worried about the mental state of a relative. Maria came out of there only after a few months. First, she went to the cemetery to her daughter, and then her feet led her to Alex's house. The familiar Priora wasn't in the driveway. Did he go out to work as a cab driver again? This can't be allowed, thought Marie. After sitting fruitlessly on the playground for several hours and seeing neither Alex nor his girlfriend, Maria went home, but the next day she came again. And only on the third day of her duty on the playground, the woman decided to approach some grandmother coming out of a familiar entrance. Hello, Maria addressed her politely. Do you happen to know Alex and Georgia? They live in this driveway. I know, why wouldn't I know, glared the grandmother with faded eyes. But you're too late, sweetheart. They sold the apartment a month ago. Really? Do you happen to know where they moved? Maria asked with a sinking heart. I know for sure that they moved to another city, but I can't tell you which one. I wasn't privy to such details. I only heard that Alex was offered a good job there. Maria walked down the street with an uncertain gait. Well, that's it. Alex's trail was lost. Where to look for him now? Or maybe it's for the best. Life will punish this guy if he's guilty. Marie needs to pull herself together and move on with her life. That's what the psychiatrist tried to tell her. She needs to get a job so she can be around people. Oh, and her sister's been pushing her to stay with her for a while, so she won't be alone. Should I take her up on her offer? While in the psychiatric hospital, Maria was a little angry with her sister. But on mature reflection, she realized that her sister only wished her well. Perhaps Maria herself would have done the same thing if she were in her sister's shoes. Her depression was worsening, threatening to spiral into dire consequences. Even now, after leaving the hospital, she'd come here to see Alex, but then life had decided she shouldn't have met him. Maria didn't go back to her house that night, where everything reminded her of her daughter. She went straight to her sister's. A few days later, she went to work. The sister began to think that Maria had coped with her grief, was able to pull herself together, although she continued to visit the cemetery and the police almost daily, as if to her home. The elderly investigator in charge of the case began to hide from Maria because he had nothing to say to her. The case remained unsolved. Georgia staggered from foot to foot, ducking her way around the apartment. Her hand had been stroking her large belly involuntarily since this morning, as if trying to calm a baby that was on a rampage. And admittedly, Georgia wasn't feeling so good. Her stomach had been aching for hours. And then Alex wouldn't come home from work. He knew that labor could start at any moment, so he could have stayed on. Alex was lucky to have a job. They hadn't lied to their parents about that when they left their hometown. In Washington, D.C., Alex had been hired by a large company as an engineer by training. The fact that he was hired with no work experience was a huge stroke of luck, and Alex worked hard to prove himself, often staying late at work. The bosses began to appreciate him for this. Everything went smoothly with the apartment too. In Washington, they'd bought an apartment no worse than the one they had in their hometown. Only it was unrenovated, but that would be done eventually. Postponed indefinitely now, sighed Georgia. We've been saving up for it, and Alex bought a car with it, and he got a loan. Suddenly, Georgia's stomach was pierced with pain, and sweat trickled down her legs. What is it? Has it really started? Where's Alex? Georgia grabbed her cell phone off the table and, fighting through the pain, dialed her husband. "Alex, where are you?" "I think it's starting. I told you to come home on time." "I'm already pulling into the yard," the guy answered excitedly. "Is it really starting? Can't you come down by yourself?" "No, don't try. I'm already running. I'm running after you." In 10 minutes, Alex drove his wife to the maternity hospital, trying to drive the car quickly, but carefully, as the girl cried out at any shaking. "It's nothing, nothing. We'll be there soon. We'll be there soon." Alex kept saying like an incantation, anxiously looking at Georgia. Georgia's labor was relatively easy. A couple of hours after she arrived at the hospital, the midwife gently patted the big girl's bottom as she let out a loud cry. "Wow, what lungs we have! How we're screaming! What a good girl!" "A girl?" Georgia asked in a weak voice, lying with slick, wet hair. "A girl," smiled the midwife. "Didn't you find out the sex of the baby at the ultrasound?" "No, my husband and I decided to let it be a surprise." "Well, that's a good surprise. We girls are always better than those bullies. Isn't that right?" The midwife winked at the exhausted woman in labor. But only Georgia herself was not sure whether Alex wanted a girl or still, like most men, dreamed of a son. When the girl recovered a little, already in the ward, she found the strength to take the phone and informed Alex very carefully, waiting for his reaction with tension. "Girl." "Great," shouted her husband into the phone. "I have a daughter." "Thank you. Georgiusz, I'm so happy. Well, can I visit you? Is it okay if I report to work tomorrow? I have to celebrate the birth of my daughter." "Celebrate?" Georgia was surprised. "Are you going to drink?" That was really weird. He hadn't had a drop to drink since that terrible event in their hometown, the day Alex had been blamed for it. It just sort of came out of the blue. Georgia didn't demand it of her husband, but Alex didn't drink. That's why the girl was so surprised now. "No, how can you not drink in honor of such an occasion?" "Don't worry, I'm not going to get drunk. I'm going to get my coworkers drunk. Let them all be happy that I became a father." Whether Alex got drunk the next day or not, Georgia never found out, but most likely he was drunk because he didn't call her for almost 24 hours, and when he did, he spoke in a muffled voice. The girl turned out to be healthy and Georgia was discharged on time. Alex came to the discharge with a bunch of balloons and a huge bouquet of roses. He gently took the baby in his arms and looked into her face with delight. "How small she is, the boy whispered. "My daughter. Let's go home. Your mom's waiting for us." Georgia's mom came to stay with them for the first time after the baby was born, to help her daughter, which Georgia was very happy about. Yeah, and Alex didn't mind. He was one of those rare sons-in-law who found it easy to get along with his mother-in-law. He was a great dad, too. After his daughter was born, he stopped working late. Alex flew home with all his legs and did not let the baby out of his arms all evening. What an attentive dad Alex is. Georgia's mom nodded her head with a smile. It's rare to meet such fathers. Your dad was afraid to hold you until you were a year old, and here, look, does not leave the baby. The girl remained a baby for almost a week. The young parents could not agree on a name for the girl. For Alex it seemed super important, and he offered his own names, which, well, just categorically did not like Georgia. The mother-in-law was getting tired of listening to the arguments of young parents. My daughter cannot be called an ordinary name. Her name should be the most unusual and beautiful. After all, she herself is an unusual beauty, said Alex, suggesting old names from which Georgia only wrinkled her nose. But at one point, she was interested. What did you just say? What was the last name you said? Alice? Alex perked up. Alice, Alice, as if tasting us, Georgia repeated several times. Why, you know I like it. Maybe we'll call it that. No way. No way. Georgia's mom looked out of the other room. Finally, you two agree on something. Will you share with me what name you like? And so, a week after she was born, the baby girl became Alice. Georgia's mom, after staying with the young ones for a couple of months, decided to go home under the persistent pressure of her husband, who wouldn't stop calling her. But she promised to come back often. The woman liked being with her daughter's family. Alex and Georgia had lived quite peacefully before, but with the arrival of a child in their apartment reigned happiness. Alice grew up and developed quite well. By a year she was running around the apartment, waiting for her daddy to come home from work. Daddy came and the first thing, right in the hallway, knelt down on his knees and spread his arms apart, and to him ran, pouring with happy laughter, Alice. Georgia always looked at this with a smile and rejoiced, though she was a little jealous of her daughter. It seemed to her that Alice loved her daddy more than she loved herself, though she still sat with her on maternity leave and didn't even think about going out to work yet. Georgia had never imagined that Alex would be such a father. He was a father to Alice. One evening, watching her husband lying on the floor, trying to build with her daughter something from the constructor, Georgia suddenly thought, and this man was once tried to accuse of such atrocities. What a good girl, I was not afraid to defend him, not afraid to lie. I was right. Alex has become the kind of father you'd expect to find. If the coroner saw him now, he'd be ashamed of his suspicions. Georgia's mom was walking down the street when a young woman's voice called out to her. Looking closer, the woman recognized Anna, an old friend of her daughter's with whom Georgia had stopped talking after the famous events. "Hello, how are you?" "How is Georgia doing?" asked Anna politely. "Everything is fine, Anna," the woman smiled. "Georgia and Alex have a daughter growing up. Are you two still not in touch?" "You know, that's what I'm talking about. I miss Georgia so much, and now I'm about to go to Washington. That's where they moved, right? Well, I'd really like to see her. Could you give me Georgia's address?" "Yes, of course," rejoiced Georgia's mother, who was a little hurt that all of her old friends were no longer in touch with her daughter. "I'll text you the address now." The woman pulled a notebook out of her bag, took out a piece of paper, and quickly scribbled down her daughter's address in Washington. Olia literally snatched it out of her hands and, muttering something, hurried away down the street, although Georgia's mother was determined to have a long conversation. The woman was so eager to share how happy her daughter was living. Only, this girl hadn't been interested in her former friend's life for a long time. With a quick step away from the woman, she went around the corner of the apartment building. There, shuffling from foot to foot with impatience, Maria was waiting for her. "How did it work out?" she asked hopefully as soon as Anna approached her. "It worked. Why not?" Anna replied. "Give me the money." Anna took the large bill from the stranger's hands and left, not the least bit interested in why the stranger needed Georgia's address. To be honest, Maria didn't fully understand it herself. What was it that kept her from living her life in peace? Why did she want to see Alex so badly? Years passed, and the woman did not calm down. Well, the saying time heals didn't work for her. It didn't work for her. Selena dreamed of her nights, screaming, calling for help. Maria stretched her arms out in longing for the cab to leave. And Alex, not without him. She dreamt about him almost every night, too, smirking, smug. Maria learned to live alone. She learned to go to work, to communicate with people, to behave as before, but her heart would not calm down. Soon the woman would have a vacation, and she, not fully aware of her actions, made an attempt to find out Alex's address. The attempt was successful. The woman stared at the piece of paper with the address on it. This was where her daughter's killer lived. Should she go there? Maria didn't know the right answer to that question, but she knew she would go. Maybe she wanted to see that Alex was also unhappy, that the past did not give him peace of mind, that he received some kind of punishment, at least moral. It can't be that having done such a thing, this guy lives enjoying life. A week later, Maria went on vacation, and a couple of days later the train took her to the not-so-distant Washington. She arrived in the city early in the morning, and having left her things in the luggage room at the station, first of all went to the address written on a slightly wrinkled paper. Approaching the apartment building, the woman did not count on luck. Most likely, she would not see anyone on the first day. At this time, as a rule, all people go to work. However, Maria was wrong. She was just calculating the entrance she needed, and Alex himself came out of it. The woman shuddered, afraid that the guy would recognize her. However, his eyes slid over her indifferently. Alex stopped, holding the door, and a little girl of about 5 years old followed him. "Hurry up, daughter, or we'll be late for kindergarten," Alex told her. Maria felt as if she had been stabbed in the heart. She walked a little farther and stopped, pretending to tie the laces on her high boots. The woman continued to watch and saw everything. She saw how Alex, shaking his head at the sight of the huge puddle, did not hesitate to grab the girl in his arms so that she would not get her feet wet. How he lovingly placed his daughter in the child's seat and buckled her in for safety. In all of this young man's movements, a great love for the little girl slipped through. The car drove away, and Maria stood frozen in place. Tears of resentment came to her eyes. So that's how it is. Well-dressed, well-fashioned Alex is quite happy. He carries his daughter in his arms, smiles at her, having deprived Maria of her girl. Why is that? Why is that? What kind of injustice is that? When Maria came here to this town, she hoped at least that Alex was unhappy too. But he's got a daughter growing up. A daughter, not a son. What kind of a mockery of fate is this? Marie had nowhere to go, so she went back to the train station. Sat there in the waiting room and sat for a long time staring at the electronic scoreboard and not seeing it. The woman's thoughts were far away. 7 years had passed since her daughter Selena was gone, and her soul had not calmed down. And now it would be worse. Maria knew that for sure. How could one live knowing that a murderer was here enjoying the happiness of family life and fatherhood? And who needs my lonely, useless life? Ripened the sudden decision in the woman's mind. I'll put it down to Alex getting as bad as me. Yes, he won't be the only one to suffer, but his wife as well. That girl, Georgia. But she deserves it too. God knows she does. I will avenge you, Selena. Your murderer will know what real pain is and remember you. Maria rose resolutely from her seat. Walking over to the ticket office, she took a ticket to her hometown. What she had in mind required serious preparation. Returning home, the woman first of all quit her job, and then began to think whether to sell her apartment or not. She needed money, a lot of money. Although Maria had money. An account was opened in the bank, still her parents'. The woman didn't touch a penny of it. She had once dreamed that Selena would use the money to get a higher education, and then she forgot about it. What did she need alone? But now it's going to come in handy. If not for Selena, then to avenge her. On the other hand, once she's done what she's done, she's not likely to come back here. So why would she need this apartment? Maria opened a classifieds website and found a realtor. She called him and told him that the sale of the apartment is urgent. So what's next? Maria thought, thinking hard. They might be looking for her. We have to make sure they don't find her. Then the woman remembered the visit of her distant relative, which he paid her about 1.5 years ago, once again released from prison. The man was a regular at places not so remote, and when he was released he visited Marie. She took pity on him, fed him home-cooked food, and the last time, having eaten a hearty meal, the criminal opened up with a relative about his many acquaintances. And by the way, he left her his new phone number. Maria scrolled through the contacts. Right, there's Dustin. That's how she'd saved it. The woman called the number, really hoping that the relative had not managed to do anything and did not go back to prison. Maria was lucky. However, picking up the phone, the man could not understand who was calling him for a long time. And when he realized he was happy and began to talk about how he now lives, what kind of woman he found, Maria interrupted his revelations. Listen, Dustin, you know how you told me about your acquaintances in criminal circles? Yes, so what? The man was wary. Now I need to make use of your connections. Don't ask me why, but I need new documents. Is that possible? Nothing is impossible, Dustin smirked, but it's very expensive. Tell me how much I'm willing to pay. Alex was late for work and already standing at the door, looked at his wife pulling on Alice's brightly colored boots with some irritation. What a bunch of pussies you are, he grumbled. Can we get ready as quickly as possible? Let's go, Georgia replied, rising and taking her daughter's hand. But if you are absolutely late, go to work, I'll call a cab, and I'll take Alice to the kindergarten myself. Alex hesitated. He looked at his watch, then at his daughter. No, don't, the young man replied. My princess shouldn't have to take a cab when Daddy has his own car. Right, Alice? Yes, Daddy, smiled the girl. I'll be in a hurry now, really, you won't be late. The family went down the elevator, and as soon as they got out of it, Alex grabbed his daughter in his arms. Daddy, I'm already big. I can walk with my legs, Alice whimpered. It's okay, you'll run around in kindergarten, and now we are in a hurry. Getting into the car, Alex nervously looked around. He had a bad feeling lately. It seemed that a malevolent look was staring into his back. Oh, come on, that's ridiculous. The man dismissed his suspicions. I'm beginning to see something. I'm overworking, I guess. Alex did work a lot, but it was worth it. The apartment had long ago been made expensive repairs, and the man's car was already much more solid than in the beginning, when they just moved to Washington. The family lived well, and little Alice did not need anything, Her father fulfilled her every whim, which was often dissatisfied with Georgia. So the other day, she and her husband had a dispute over a cell phone given to their daughter. Alex, but it's too early for Alice. No one carries a cell phone to daycare. But my daughter will. Alex cut her off. And if anything goes wrong, she'll call her daddy. Yes, Alice? He winked at his daughter. A little later, Alex regretted his words. Alice called him nonstop and distracted him from his work. Now, taking his daughter to kindergarten, the man decided to talk to her. Alice, listen, I am very glad that you have learned to call on the phone, but let's make a deal with you so that you will call me only in extreme cases, when something really serious happens. The rest of the little things like Frank getting cereal on his face, you'll tell me in the evenings when I get home from work. Deal? What's an emergency? The kid was wondering. What serious thing would have to happen for me to call you? Georgia, sitting next to her husband in the front passenger seat, grinned. She immediately understood the danger of such a gift to her daughter, and on the first day, she had explained to Alice that when her mother was at work, she should not be disturbed. But Alex tried to do it only now. And that could not formulate his request. Look, Alice, seriously is when, for example, you hurt yourself, God forbid, of course, or someone's hurt you. That's when you call me. Daddy will take care of it. Okay, Daddy, I understand. Alice nodded importantly. Frank was mean to me just yesterday. He said I'm a chatterbox because my mouth never closes. When he insults me like that, can I call you? Georgia was already laughing openly, and Alex sighed heavily. No, Alice, you don't understand. It doesn't count as an offense, but if Frank had beaten you. As they talked, the family drove to the daycare center. And although Alice was taken there by her mother, Alex hurriedly jumped out of the car to kiss his daughter. Already entering the gate, Georgia looked back. Alex, will you wait for me, or are you running late? I'll wait for you, of course I will. Just hurry up. Don't take too long. Understood, said Georgia and turned to her daughter. All right, Alice, let's go. Feet, 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 hurry, hurry. Daddy's in a hurry. Georgia was happy. Why shouldn't she be? A full house, a handsome, loving husband who couldn't get enough of their child. The girl went to work. She got a job in the personnel department of the very enterprise where Alex worked. He was the one who got her the job. George's salary was small, but it did not embarrass them. Alex received more than well. In the HR department, her female co-workers looked at her enviously when her husband would pick her up on his lunch break and they would go out to eat together. There was a lot to envy. Alex, who had once been just a handsome guy, had turned into a very prominent young man. Georgia jumped out of the daycare center without paying attention to the cab car that had just stopped behind Alex's car. For some reason, no one was in a hurry to get out of it. Maria was in the cab, and she was paying the fare and stalling on purpose, not wanting to get out until Alex and his wife drove away. Just because he didn't recognize her didn't mean Georgia wouldn't either. Women tended to be more attentive, and Alex himself had been acting a little twitchy lately, always looking around when Maria was watching him. It seemed that the man could feel her angry, hateful gaze. Finally, Maria saw the car ahead of her drive away. Then she, too, got out of the cab. There they were, the gate of the garden. Maria had already examined this very garden from the outside, coming here every day as if it were work. The woman already knew the schedule of children's walks, knew all the teachers by sight. The woman already realized in whose shift she would try to take Alice away. Of course, the shift of the youngest one, who was always on the phone while the children were walking. Children usually walked in the yard. It was necessary to go around the block, and there, from behind the usual fence, easily visible playground for children. There, before lunch, the children who were taken out for a walk played noisily. Opposite the fence was a park. You could walk in it without arousing suspicion or sit on a bench, which Maria had been doing for more than a week. The woman knew the weak spot in the fence, and what there was to know. She herself, with her own hands, bent a leaf, having come here one evening, when there was no one in the garden except the elderly watchman. Now, the only thing to do was to choose the moment when Alice would come close to the gap in the fence. Maria was on duty every day, but there was no chance. Either the teacher was from vigilance, or the girl played far from the fence. And so, in the second week of her observations, Maria noticed Alice near the fence. The woman's heart beat faster. She raced toward the garden. It was now or never, Maria decided. The teacher was the same one, a young woman who paid little attention to the children. The woman pulled back a leaf and called out in a loud whisper, "Alice, come here, girl." The child wondered who it was calling her name. The girl approached and, tilting her head, peered through the hole. "Who are you, Auntie? How do you know my name?" "I'm an acquaintance of your daddy's. He's waiting for you around the corner, and he's got a surprise for you. Come on, get out of the hole. You and I will go to him." The girl incredulously furrowed her brow, looked at her unfamiliar aunt. "Why is he waiting for me around the corner? Why didn't he come for me himself?" "I told you, Daddy has a surprise for you. Why do you doubt it? Your dad's name is Alex and your mom's name is Georgia. Isn't that right?" "Yes, it's true," nodded her head importantly. "And what surprise has my daddy prepared for me?" Alice became very curious. "All right, so be it. Pretend side Maria, I'll tell you. But you still be surprised when Daddy presents." "Okay. Daddy brought you a beautiful fluffy kitten. He couldn't wait till the end of the day. You wanted to make you happy." "A kitten?" joyfully shrieked Alice, so that Maria was even afraid, as if this shout did not attract the attention of the teacher. The young teacher did not lift her head from the phone. The little girl slipped unnoticed through the hole in the fence and trustingly followed the unfamiliar aunt, waiting for a kitten from her daddy. Georgia was on her lunch break, so she and her husband were having lunch at a cafe not far from the business where they both worked. The girl's cell phone was on the table next to her, and Georgia was a little surprised to see the name of her daughter's teacher's fatherland pop up on the screen. Still, her heart didn't sense trouble until she picked up the phone. Georgia listened in silence for a while. Then her face changed. "What are you talking about? How could this happen? What do you mean she's nowhere to be found? So you're telling me that after the walk, you didn't notice Alice was gone? And you only realized she was gone when you saw the empty bed when the kids went to bed at bedtime? Are you serious? Stop crying and find my girl. We'll be right there." Tensely watching his wife's conversation, Alex jumped up from his seat, almost knocking over the table. What's wrong with Alice?" Georgia raised frightened eyes at her husband. "The teacher says she's missing. Allegedly, after the walk, Alice didn't go indoors with the others." Wait, how can that be?" Alex excitedly took his cell phone out of his pocket. "I'm going to dial her now. I'll call Alice." "You forgot. She has her own phone now." The man started calling his daughter, putting her on speakerphone. The husband and wife listened tensely to the long beeps and were already desperate when the other end picked up the phone. Alice, daughter, answer." "Where are you?" Alex shouted. "Alice can't answer now," said a very vaguely familiar female voice. "Who are you? Why you have our daughter's cell phone?" "Maybe because I have your daughter. I took the girl's phone away from her. She won't need it anymore," the woman replied. "Who the hell are you?" "Did you kidnap my daughter?" "Yes, you're right. I kidnapped Alice, except she's still alive, unlike my Selena. Remember what you did to my little girl?" Suddenly Alex understood. He realized what had made him so uncomfortable the last few days, when it felt like he was being watched, and something else. That face had flashed recently, flashed somewhere in the courtyard of their house or somewhere else. The man couldn't remember. He hadn't recognized Maria at that moment either, but now her face was clearly in front of his eyes. Alex's palm instantly sweated, and the phone began to slip out of it. Then Georgia grabbed the phone. "What do you want from us, what?" she shouted excitedly. "Money? You want money? We'll pay you whatever you want." "Hello, Georgia," Maria snorted. "Well, girl, you remember me? Remember how I cried and convinced you that you were living with a monster who took away the meaning of my life? I don't want that kind of life, but I won't give you any more. Can you seriously offer me money?" "Why? Is it to replace my daughter? You think money can replace your Alice? That's just it. What do you want from us then?" Alex shouted. "I want to deprive you of what you deprived me of," said the woman to the parents, who were freezing with horror. "But for now, I won't be in a hurry. Alice will live as long as you follow my instructions, and here's the first thing. You mustn't make a fuss about your daughter's disappearance. If you go to the police, you'll never see her again. I buried my daughter, and I'll let you bury Alice. Is that understood?" How can we not make a fuss? There's already panic at the daycare center. I wouldn't be surprised if the teachers call the police before we get there. That's your problem. You have to handle it the way you want. That's your concern. Take my word for it. If you go to the police, you won't see your daughter alive. Don't try to sneak around, I'll find out. I'll turn this phone off now and call you next time tonight. Then we'll talk about the next steps." Maria disconnected and immediately, following her word, turned off Alice's phone. Of course, she was bluffing. How could she know whether Alex and Georgia would go to the police or not? But she understood the psychology of parents who were afraid to make an extra move now. It was unlikely they would disobey her instructions. Maria hid the phone in her bag so Alice wouldn't find it, and only then went to the other room. There a disgruntled little girl was whining. "Auntie, where's Daddy? You promised me. I promised you a kitten, and here he is." The woman showed her hand on a fluffy ball curled up on the girl's lap. "Why don't you play with it?" "I've already played. I want to go home to Mommy and Daddy. When are you taking me to them?" "Your mom and dad had to leave town, and they asked me to take care of you. So cry me a river, you're gonna have to live here." "Then why did you take my cell phone?" "I want to make a call." "You can't call. I told you. Your parents are busy. Sit still. If you want to eat, I'll feed you now." At this time on Alice's lap moved awake from the conversation gray kitten, and the girl switched to him. "Yes, I want to eat and my kitty also wants to eat. And what does Kodia like?" "Kitty likes milk, and I made you some milk noodles." When the phone buzzed, Alex threw the phone furiously on the cafe table, as if it was his fault for the sad news. "What is it?" muttered the shocked Georgia. "That woman must be out of her mind." "Probably crazy," Alex answered. "Ah, you can expect anything from crazy people. Hurry up, let's go to the daycare center. We have to settle things there before they think of calling the police." "Are we going to follow her instructions?" Georgia said, more affirmatively than questioningly. "From now," Alex said. "It's scary to disobey, very scary. You heard everything yourself. What if that crazy woman is really—" Alex couldn't finish the sentence, but Georgia understood him. Sometime later, when they drove up to Alice's garden, Georgia wiped her tears in the car and carefully powdered her face so that her upset look would not be noticeable. Only then did the girl enter the building. Snorting contemptuously in the direction of the crying young teacher, Georgia went straight to the office of the headmistress. "Tell me, what's going on here?" Without saying hello, the girl began to indignate right from the threshold. "My husband today decided to pick up Alice early, came and approached the children when they were on a walk. Your teacher didn't even dare." "What are you trying to tell me now? That Alice was taken away by her father?" Jumped out of the table headmistress, who had previously sat with her hands clasped her head and imagined the terrible consequences of the missing child for the garden and for herself. "Of course the father, who else could it be?" "So, you didn't say anything? So you stole your own child from the daycare center?" "What do you mean, you stole?" Georgia raised her voice. "My husband went over to my daughter to tell the teacher he was picking her up, but she was so busy that she didn't even notice the man on the playground." "What do you call that? Why don't you watch the kids? We'll file a complaint." "Don't complain," the headmistress said in a conciliatory voice. "We will take action. The teacher will be severely punished." "I hope so. I think punished is not the right word. She should be fired. Such irresponsible people should not be working with children." With these words, Georgia turned around and left the office. The headmistress ran after the girl and, in an ingratiating voice, looking into the girl's face, asked, "And Alice will come to the kindergarten tomorrow?" "No," said Georgia. "Alice will not come to this kindergarten. Not yet, definitely not going. We'll think about moving her to another place." Georgia and Alex sat silently at the kitchen table. In front of them were 2 glasses of cool tea, and in the center of the table was a telephone. The couple had nothing more to say to each other. They waited, waiting for the call. This call, at this moment, was more important to them than anything else in the world. Maria had called late at night, on purpose to make Alex and Georgia more nervous. The woman seemed to revel in their suffering. "What, are you waiting?" she asked when Alex grabbed the phone. "Waiting," the man replied briefly. "As Alice, let us talk to her." "What do you think? You're the one who's going to dictate terms to me." "Alice is fine for now, but I'm not gonna let you talk to her. You'll have to settle for my voice." "Do you want your daughter to live?" "Of course I do." "What a question," Alex yelled. "But you didn't spare my Selena. I'll never hear her laugh again, never see her grow up. I dream about her at night, asking for help. And what happened to her before she died? I can't even think about it. It's been so many years, and I can't rest. I don't want to live. Now I know what I'm gonna do. I'll lay my life on the altar of your suffering. You must answer for what you've done." "What have I done?" What? Alex screamed. How can't you realize it wasn't me? Even the coroner, after forensics, cleared me of suspicion. And not just on George's word. How can you still not understand that? I don't want to hear any of your excuses. I don't want to hear any of your excuses, Maria shrieked. Don't lie to me, you're not fooling me. I know for sure it's you. I felt uneasy as soon as I put my daughter in your car. I saw the look in your eyes, the crazy look in your eyes. Don't try to tell me it wasn't your fault again. What should I say then? Alex asked tiredly. You have to tell me everything. Everything that happened that night. Everything you did to my little girl. I need to know, no matter how hard it is for me to hear. I have nothing to tell you. Then this conversation is over. I'll give you time to think and call you back tomorrow. Just think carefully, my patience is not unlimited. Tomorrow you'll go to work and act like nothing happened. I'm warning you one last time, don't make a fuss. There were short beeps in the phone and Alex grabbed his head. This is a hopeless situation, just hopeless. She's crazy. How are we going to get Alice back now? Georgia, who was sitting at the table staring at one point and listening attentively to the conversation between her husband and Maria, slowly raised her heavy gaze to Alex. Why does she say that you came after Selena in a deranged state? You really weren't yourself that night, but you told me you took a pill, felt sick, and went straight home. So you lied to me? And you were already drugged at 10 o'clock p.m. when you put the girl in the cab. Why else would she know that? I never told anyone what state you came home in. She couldn't have guessed. Well, maybe I took a pill before I told you. So what? What does it matter now? It makes a huge difference. It turns out you lied to me about that. It also turns out you were already out of it by 10 o'clock and you didn't get home until 3 o'clock. And what did you do in that state? Taxiing. Alex snapped at me. Enough of this already. Let's think about what to do next. She'll call tomorrow, and what? What will I tell her? You'll confess, Georgia said calmly. Confess to what? Alex got upset. Everything? You'll say you didn't know what was going on. You don't remember half of it. In short, make up whatever you want. This crazy woman wants to hear a confession, so she has to hear it. You don't think this crazy woman wants me to confess for a reason? She'll probably be recording our conversation on a tape recorder. Let her record it. What we need right now is for her to get our daughter back, and then you can explain that you made it up under duress. Georgia and Alex sat in the kitchen until 3 in the morning, arguing and disagreeing, deciding what they would do when Maria called again. Then Georgia looked at the glowing dial on the microwave. It's 3 o'clock. You should try to get some sleep. She did tell you to go to work, didn't she? Of course I'm not going. Come by HR tomorrow and tell them I'm on sick leave. Now let's try to get some sleep. Georgia knew she wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, but she had no more energy to argue with her husband. In the bedroom, the girl lay on her back and lay in the dark, with wide open eyes, from which from time to time tears flowed out. Alex stirred next to her for a long time, then forgot himself in a restless half-dream. He had talked in his sleep before, but now the words turned into shouts. Alice, daughter, Alice, the man called painfully. Then his voice changed. It became different, very different. It was the kind of voice Georgia rarely heard from her husband. I will not answer alone. I won't, you hear me? It's your fault. Alex shouted in his sleep and woke up, jerking on the bed. Who were you talking to? What were you dreaming about? Georgia asked cautiously. I wasn't dreaming about anything, snapped the man. He got out of bed and headed to the bathroom to wash off the cold sweat that had appeared on his face during the dream. Closing the door behind him, Alex washed his face and stared at his reflection in the mirror. Droplets trickled down his drawn cheekbones and fell on the sink. Of course, Alex remembered his dream. In the dream, he dreamed of the man he was destined to meet that very ill-fated evening. He had told Alex his name was Donald. Donald was supposedly on a business trip in Alex's city and was having a good time. He was the one who offered the cabbie that pill and more than one. Alex had taken at least 3 of them over the course of the evening. He liked this state, the feeling of omnipotence, and Donald was in no hurry to leave the cab. That's when the guy got a call to an address he already knew. Oh, there's a girl to pick up. I've been there before. You pick up the girl, take her to a relative's house. Her mother pays in advance. A girl, you say? Donald's eyes lit up. Let's take the girl together. That would be strange. Alex hesitated. Her mother is seeing her off. and there's a man in the car besides the driver. All right, drop me off somewhere nearby, around the corner. You pick up the girl, put me back in the car. Alex seemed to be having a lot of fun at that moment, and he agreed. Selena's mom looked at him suspiciously, but kept silent. All because Alex, in light of what Donald had said, looked at Selena with different eyes. Now, standing in the bathroom, Alex could hardly take his eyes off his reflection, and grabbing a towel, furiously began to rub his wet face. He tried so hard, he wanted so much all these years to erase the memories of that evening from himself, to forget Selena's and Donald's face. And now it all came back with such clarity. When he pulled around the corner, he put Donald back in the car. He didn't get into the front seat, but climbed into the back, next to the confused girl. "Oh, what a pretty little girl we have here," the man sang, holding out his arms to Selena. And Alex laughed, laughing, watching in the rearview mirror at what was happening in the seat. How much fun he was having at that moment, how omnipotent he felt. Alex washed his face once more and left the bathroom, trying to be quiet so as not to wake up his wife, who was napping as he thought. However, as soon as he stepped into the hallway, he came across Georgia standing there in the darkness. "What are you doing?" the man asked in a whisper. "What are you standing here for? Tell me everything. Tell me what happened that night," Georgia said in a grave voice. "You know everything. What else do I have to tell you?" Alex was frightened. "No, as it turned out, I don't know anything. And the worst thing is that I don't know you at all. You talk in your sleep, Alex. And now you've confessed everything when you were asleep. I heard everything." Georgia lied a little. "What could I have been mumbling in my sleep?" the man asked with a nervous chuckle. "I don't know what I was dreaming about." "Stop lying," Georgia raised her voice. "Our daughter's life is at stake right now. The life of your beloved Alice. Now I can understand the pain of that poor woman who stole Alice. Maybe she's crazy, but who are you? How could you hurt a girl? It's a child, Alex. How could you look at her with lust?" Georgia purposely did not turn on the light in the hallway, so that her husband would not see with what horror and disgust she looked at him. She was rethinking a lot of things now, after her husband's Bormodorgia in the dream. But more than anything else, she wanted Alex to refute all of her horrible guesses. She wanted her to be wrong. And her husband suddenly shouted, "What are you talking about? How could I look at the child with lust? It wasn't me, it wasn't me. It was another man, my client, who did it by slipping me those damn pills. I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't fully understand what he was doing." "So it happened in your car?" Georgia asked, trying to keep her composure. "No, of course not. It started in my car, but when I realized what Donald was up to, I took him and the girl behind the abandoned stadium. By then it was getting dark outside. We got out of the car. It all happened there." "Were you there all the way?" "Georgia, listen to me. I'm telling you, I didn't know what I was doing." "Yes, I was there. Donald asked me to be a part of it, but I didn't. No, I swear. I was horrified myself when I realized what that business trip guy had done. But you know, when he was done and he was getting in the car, the girl was still alive, and I was afraid she'd point the finger at me. Donald's not a local. He's not a local. He took the train and he was gone. Look for him later. I told Donald about it, and he suggested I finish the girl myself. But I couldn't. You hear me, Georgia? I couldn't. Donald had to do that too." "What? What did you say?" Georgia whispered. "You asked that man to kill the girl so she wouldn't recognize you, so she could stay alive. Georgia, you saw me that night. Did I look like myself? You think I didn't curse myself that night? You've lived with me for so many years. Am I such a bad person? Yeah, I was scared, so what? Anyone would be scared." "Anyone?" Georgia squealed. "Did you say anyone? Anybody couldn't have been in your place. Are you a bad person? As it turns out, you're not a human being at all. I don't know who you are. Why did you confess everything back at the police station?" "I would have gone to jail. I would have gone to jail as an accessory." "And you should be." I have to. The girl squealed, completely out of control. "And this other one, he's walking the earth, and who knows what he's done since then. And it will be your fault too, yours. You have to confess everything. Confess to that woman. Go to the police. Tell them to look for the killer. You describe what he looks like and they'll be able to track him down." Alex saw that his wife was becoming hysterical and stepped towards her and slapped Georgia. "Calm down. I'm not going to confess anything. Think about it. I have a job, a good job. I'm respected by my coworkers. I have a great family. Yes, I've made mistakes. I've slipped up. But it wasn't me at the time. What am I supposed to do now? Sit down. And by the way, don't forget that you're going to be held accountable. You perjured yourself. You covered for me that night. How can you prove you didn't do it willfully without knowing what happened? Georgia squatted down in the dark hallway and clasped her face with her palms. Let it, she whispered through her fingers. It's my fault. I'll be responsible. This woman, Maria, she's not a murderer and she won't do anything to Alice. She's just an unhappy mother who wants justice, and she should get it. Why didn't I listen to her years ago? Then she kept telling me it was your fault. She's a mother, she felt. You're not a human being. You're a monster. Alex hovered over his wife, his hands involuntarily clenched into fists. For the first time in his life, a man wanted to hit Georgia. To hit her so that she would shut up. Shut up and not repeat those terrible words. He was already sorry he told her everything under her pressure. Somehow it seemed that having lived with him in peace and harmony for so many years, his wife would understand him, would accept the only mistake in his life. Shut up, the man yelled. I don't want to talk to you anymore. You should be on my side. But you're right about one thing. That crazy woman isn't the killer. She can't hurt Alice. And I'm a fool for going along with her. I'll go to the police in the morning. They'll find her quickly and give us our daughter back. You're going to the police? Georgia raised a tear-stained face. You'll report your daughter's kidnapping and you'll tell them about your guilt? Will you confess? That's it, Georgia. That's it. Calm down. The man leaned over and took his wife by the shoulders, trying to get her to her feet. Georgia recoiled from him. Don't touch me, she squealed again. Okay. Alex raised his palms in the air. I realize what you just found out may be a shock to you, but you need to think it through. Have I been a bad husband and a bad father to Alice? I've provided for you, taken care of you. I've given my life for my daughter. Then do it, Georgia hissed. Admit what you've done for your daughter and for the suffering soul of a poor woman. How have you lived with it all these years? How? Didn't Selena come to you in your dreams, in your nightmares? I crossed that moment out of my life, crossed it out and tried to forget it. It wasn't as hard as you think, because it wasn't me at that moment. You know, I stopped drinking after that night. It was scary to be even a little bit of what I was that night. Alex cautiously tried to approach his wife once more, but Georgia pulled her hand forward warningly. Stay back. More than anything, I want to jump out of this apartment and go somewhere far away, to forget everything I'd learned last night. Except, unlike you, I can't live with that. I can't. Georgia staggered backward and went into the bedroom, shutting the door tightly behind her. Her husband stood there, frowning his eyebrows and staring at that door. Georgia was out of her mind, suggesting he give in. He hadn't expected her to react that way. Though maybe if he went to the police now with a confession, Maria would immediately bring Alice back. Her thirst for revenge would be satisfied. And him? Why should he suffer? That mad woman wouldn't touch his daughter anyway. It's strange that he didn't realize it right away. When Alex went to the police and filed a report about his daughter's kidnapping, they were very surprised. Why did you come to us right away? Especially since the kidnapper called from your daughter's cell phone. Even if she turns off her cell phone, we'll be able to pinpoint her location. Now, we can only hope she hasn't gotten rid of the phone by now. She hasn't. Alex grinned wryly. She's supposed to call from it again tonight. And how much money is she demanding from you for the girl? What did you promise her? That you would raise the necessary amount? She doesn't want money. That woman is crazy. She thinks I had something to do with her daughter's death and wants me to confess. But it's not true. Alex hastened to assure her, seeing how the policeman frowned at his last words. My innocence is proven, but this woman, unfortunately, it is impossible to prove anything. She's crazy. If she's crazy, that's a different matter. It's scary. I don't know what's in her mind. But on the other hand, she may not have thought to get rid of the phone. When the police burst into the apartment Maria had rented long before, they were very surprised. The woman was sure that neither Alex nor Georgia would go to the authorities, fearing for Alice's life. Maria judged for herself. She certainly wouldn't have gone if she'd been told her Selena's life depended on it. The cops opened the door and flew into the apartment. Alice was in the kitchen at the time, eating delicious cutlets that the strict, but at the same time absolutely not evil Aunt Maria had fried for her. Kodja, who was rubbing against the girl's leg. He also had some cutlets. One of the men in uniform came into the kitchen and took the girl in his arms. Don't be afraid. Your name is Alice, right? I'll take you to your mom and dad. And I'm not afraid, replied Alice. But your daddy and mommy are gone. That's what Aunt Maria told me. She said they had something to do and had to leave immediately. They're back and waiting for you at home. Did Aunt Maria hurt you? She took away my phone, which my father gave me. How did the girl? But she gave me Kodia. Let me go. I want to ask Aunt Maria if she'll let me take Kodia with me. I think she will, said the policeman, picking up the kitten from the floor. Here, take it. Aunt Maria doesn't have time right now. The policeman, taking the girl with the kitten out of the apartment, tried to make sure that the girl did not see how Maria was handcuffed in the other room. After that, a search of the apartment was started and forged documents were found there, and not only for Maria. They also found a fake birth certificate for a child, a girl of 5 years old. According to this certificate, she was Maria's daughter. So, the policeman held up the forged passport and birth certificate. And you claimed to the parents that you would give them back their daughter. So it wasn't part of your plans and you lied to them. No, I didn't lie, Maria calmly replied, resigned to the situation. I would have returned Alice to Georgia if Alex had confessed to his crime. I would never hurt that girl. But if Alex put his own well-being above his daughter's life, I would leave with Alice. I'd go into hiding and he'd never see his daughter again. He has to take some responsibility for what he's done. He must suffer. I'd punish him at least this way. I'd let him and his wife think their daughter was dead, too. They deserved it. I don't know what happened, but what you did is a very serious crime. Kidnapping a child. And I don't know what you wanted from the girl's father. Okay, we'll figure it out. You'll figure it out. You will? The woman laughed a sinister laugh. My Selena died so brutally, and you've been dealing with this for years. I'm tired of knocking on every door and proving that Alex did it. No one believes me. My little girl's murder still goes unpunished. And now you're telling me you're gonna figure it out? What the hell do you have to figure out? The policeman glanced warily at the woman who was laughing her creepy laugh. She had seemed quite normal to him before she laughed. She must be crazy, he thought. The girl's father isn't lying. That woman is insane with grief. He also said she was already in a mental institution. She'll probably go back there. Except this time she's not likely to come out quickly, if at all. The man who had taken Alice to her overjoyed parents noticed that the atmosphere in their apartment was tense. Yes, of course, both of them rushed to meet Alice, and both of them were overjoyed. Only here, between the couple themselves as if a cat ran, it was noticeable even from the outside. Alice alone did not notice anything. The girl was happy to be back home. Daddy, when did you come back? And where did you go without me? Aunt Maria said you wouldn't be back for a while. Aunt Maria said. Alex frowned. What else did she say? Nothing else. She gave me a kitten. His name is Kodia. Here, the girl showed her parents a small gray lump that looked frighteningly out of her sinuses. Can Kodia live with us? Of course, let him live, smiled exhaustedly Georgia. So Aunt Maria was good to you. I already told my uncle the policeman. Aunt Maria took away my cell phone. She's strict. Why did you decide to leave me with her? Alex opened his mouth, ready to speak about Maria, but his wife gave him a warning look and prevented him from saying a word. Quickly speaking, it happened, Alice, it happened. We were in a great hurry. You tell me, are you hungry? Did Aunt Maria feed you long ago? No, just now. She fried me some cutlets, and she let Coda have one too. Georgia saw that her daughter was quite well with Maria and did not want to traumatize her with stories about the kidnapping and that this woman could harm her. The child didn't need that information. Let her think that Aunt Maria is actually an acquaintance of theirs, and in all likelihood, she couldn't hurt the girl. Maria wanted to hurt Alex, make him confess, not hurt the child. And to some extent, Georgia understood the grief-stricken woman, though she didn't approve of her methods. But putting herself in Maria's place, she could not clearly answer how she would have acted in her place. It was frightful to imagine that she could have lost Alice, and in such a monstrous way. In fact, anyone could go crazy here. Alex could not look at his daughter back home, but his phone was ringing off the hook. The man got tired of ringing and picked up the phone. Okay, I'll be right there, he said curtly. It's urgent to get to work. The man turned to his wife, who hadn't spoken to him since the night before. The papers need to be signed. Drive Georgia through. As soon as her husband, hastily dressed, left the apartment, Georgia said to her daughter, Alice, we're going to Grandma and Grandpa's now. Come on, get your things together. And Daddy, why is not going with us? Wondered the child. Daddy can't. He has work. You heard yourself. He will come to us later when he has settled all his affairs. Let's put your things away. And Kodia. The girl whimpered. We're not leaving Kodia, are we? He's coming with us to his grandparents? Let him go, sighed Georgia tiredly, but just so that we would not be dropped off the train with your Kodia. Okay, on the way we'll stop at a pet store and buy a cat carrier. When Alex returned home a few hours later, he found neither his wife nor his daughter at home, only a mess in the apartment. It was obvious that Georgia had packed hastily, but still, she had time to scribble a note to her husband. I'm taking Alice and going to my parents' house. Don't try to follow us. We won't live with you anymore anyway. I do not know how to live on with such a burden. Go to the police and confess what you did. Dustin was trying to make borscht. It wasn't his first attempt, but unfortunately for the pensioner, it wasn't as good as his late wife's. She had borscht, but the man's was just red water. His wife died a long time ago before Dustin retired. So the man continued to work even at retirement age because no one was waiting for him at home. But the last case knocked him out of his rut and forced the investigator to retire. It was the case of the murdered girl. The apartment doorbell rang. The man was glad someone remembered the old man and decided to visit him. Maybe one of his co-workers. Dustin opened the door and stared at the unfamiliar young woman. Why unfamiliar though? He'd seen her somewhere. I wish you could remember where. You don't remember me, Georgia concluded. Your case when the girl died. I was in your office writing a statement. I wrote that my boyfriend was home at 11 o'clock at night. My boyfriend's a cab driver. Yeah, don't go on, I remember, Dustin said. I apologize for coming to your house. I know you're retired, but you're the one I wanted to talk to. Come in now that you're here. The man stepped aside, letting the girl enter the apartment. Georgia talked impulsively, confusedly, poppily. It was evident that she had prepared for this speech in advance. She stopped talking abruptly. There was a tense silence in the apartment. Dustin sighed heavily and lifted his head to Georgia, who was blushing with excitement. I suspected something like that at the time. No, I didn't think your Alex was guilty, or I wouldn't have let him go so easily. There was, some DNA mismatch, but I saw you lying. I saw it. So what now? I'm retired. Why did you come to me with your confession? Help me. Come with me to the police station and we'll tell the story together. You know how it's done, who to go to. I'll sign everything. I'll confess everything. Is it true you've lived with this man for so many years and didn't realize he might be involved? You're ready to confess, but do you realize you'll be tried too? The crime is heavy, and for giving false testimony in such a case, you could face a real term or correctional labor. I'm ready. Georgia bravely looked her former investigator in the eye. I know, and I'm ready to answer for my guilt. Let Alex do the same. And most importantly, you must find the other one. My husband said his name was Donald. The new investigator, he'll be looking, won't he? This case, how you say, isn't it out of date? There's no statute of limitations on such cases. Dustin said sternly, rising from his seat. Wait for me here, I'll change my clothes, and we'll go with you to the police. The next day, Alex was arrested. It was a complete surprise to the man. No matter how his wife behaved, he was sure that she would not go to the police. After all, then she would have to answer to the law too. Alex thought that Georgia would cool down a bit, rethink everything, and come back to him. He was a good husband. Alex was transferred to his hometown, and there, the new young investigator came in for his first interrogation, along with the one who had once handled the case. Dustin, I think his name is, Alex remembered. I know what you're trying to accuse me of, but it's no use, he grinned. My wife and I had a fight, and she decided to ruin my life. She's lying. The young investigator, who had hoped for a heartfelt confession, was confused. A lot of time had passed, and in fact, except for George's words, there was nothing to present to this polished man. However, Dustin wasn't confused. I'll tell you what, Alex, you're not gonna get away with it this time. Georgia told me everything. The actual time you came home, the condition you were in, and most importantly, the clothes you washed last night. And there's one more thing. At about 11:30 that night, Georgia's upstairs neighbor came by. Your wife concealed that fact at the time, so the neighbor can also confirm that you weren't home at that time. Anyway, you're going to jail. If you don't start telling the truth, you'll go to jail for everything. I'd already know there were two of you and you were a passive observer. But if you don't start testifying, you'll go down alone as the only guilty party. Dustin was bluffing a little. George's testimony wasn't enough to convict Alex, but he didn't know that. The pale Alex felt like the circle had closed and became truly afraid. It was scary to go to jail, and on such a charge. The former investigator, without letting Alex think, kept pressing him. He knew the right pressure points. You already know that it's not me, not me. Alex, crushed morally, almost cried. It was that business traveler. His name was Donald. And now be more detailed. The young investigator became more active. What kind of Donald? In what hotel did he stay? Where did you pick him up from, and where did you take him? Dustin exhaled and only watched his colleague, who had taken the bull by the horns. Alex began to tell, not trying to hide anything else. The man remembered every little detail that could be used to track Donald down. Literally in a week, the police had figured out all the men of the right age who were on a business trip in their city at that time. And within a couple of days, the notorious Donald was identified. He turned out not to be Donald at all. The man had given the cab driver a false name. The only truth was that the man was on a business trip. That's why the criminal felt so unpunished in a foreign city. This man turned out to be an excellent family man with 2 grown-up children. During the investigation, another terrible detail came to light. In the hometown of the criminal, after the events that took place here, there were 2 similar murders of girls. Apparently, the man, who could now safely be called a maniac, got into the taste. Dustin, when he found out, was very upset. After all, it was possible to prevent the subsequent murders if he had brought Alex to light. The investigator felt guilty. Although it became clear what Alex was so afraid of. Perhaps he had not told his wife the whole truth about that night. The detainee, the imaginary Donald, claimed that he was going to leave the girl on the vacant lot alive, and it was Alex who strangled her, afraid that the child would recognize him. The investigation was still far from over, but it was already clear that both Donald and Alex would receive huge sentences. Dustin pushed for Georgia to mitigate the punishment and give the minimum, due to the late but repentance. It was only because of her that this old case had been brought up and brought to a conclusion. Maria stood at the window of the mental hospital with her gaze fixed on the distance. An absent-minded smile wandered on her lips. A few minutes ago, a former investigator had walked out from her to tell her that the killer had finally been caught. And not just one. There were 2 of them. Now the woman knew for sure she'd done the right thing by not settling down about Alex. She may have kidnapped an innocent child, but in the end it resulted in catching the real culprits. God knows she didn't hurt the girl. As Dustin was leaving, he turned around. By the way, I almost forgot. I wanted to give you George's words. She's on her knees apologizing to you. She is guilty and cursing herself for what she did.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.